All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Genesis study. We are now in Genesis chapter 33, and we come out of 32, and we saw Jacob wrestle, with who we believe was an appearance of Yahusha at that time, and we watched and we looked and related to what he went through as Yahusha touched his thigh, and we watched his sinew, his muscle, his ligament shrink, and we likened it to when we go in or come in contact with Yah. What does he shrink from us? What does he take from us? What shrinks in our lives to become more like him? But he then moves into the motion of heading towards his brother. And we wanted to look at the whole idea of what is going through Jacob's mind, what is going through Esau's mind. So as we read through, we see Jacob anticipating the return of his brother. So let's look into it. We'll take 7 verses at a time, I guess. Who wants to take the first 7 verses? Genesis chapter 33.
I think we got 20 verses in this book, don't we?
I'll read the first 7.
20. Yeah. All right, we could do 5.
5, okay.
5, yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel, and unto the 2 handmaidens. And he put the handmaids and the children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. And he passed over before them, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near to his brother. And Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw the women and the children, and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children of Yah hath graciously given thy servant.
What you see, bro?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't personally know what it is. I'm hoping somebody can bring out the importance of the way that he divided them, because I think that's going to have to mean something.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But I like how he came to him humble. He bowed himself 7 times, which again, that's probably the traditional thing, but still has a meaning in itself. And the biggest thing that sticks out to me that I love is how Esau ran to meet him. You know, after everything, it's just that's really awesome. Like this is like the climax here. Like, you know, if we already knew what happens, you know, if we were to read the book from the beginning and we get to this part, just as Jacob, we would be expecting Esau to come ready to try to slay him or something, like he said he would. But instead, to see this complete turn of events, that he comes happy, crying, hugging, and kissing on his brother that's done him so wrong, like it's really beautiful. But yeah, so really I have more questions as who can bring out the division there, and then if anybody has anything on him bowing 7 times, obviously number completion and humility, but if there's anything else to that.
Yeah, a lot there in what you're asking and what we read. You know, I think, you know, as we look at it, you know, in the mind of Jacob, you know, just like you said, he's thinking just like we would. But I think coming with that is he also knows that there's 400 men. You know what I mean? So he's going into protection mode here as he structures his family, because what he does is he patterns them for protection, and he places them in position. So his favorite wife is who? Rachel. She's in the back. She's in the rear. And he aligns his family members according to, I guess, the importance or who would go first or however. But it's in a way of protection. And then he bows himself repeatedly, 7 times for completion. But I think this is in total submission and to make sure that he knows and sees, I'm submitting myself to you. And I think partly because there's guilt there, you know, in the way in which, you know, he continually, you know, made ways to get the blessing, because we're gonna read on where the blessing is offered back. But he fought to get that blessing, right? Even lied and contrived to get it, knowing that Yah was going to give it to him anyway, and now feeling guilty and fearful that he's coming at him. So I think the positioning, what you see, was a position to protect his family. The bowing was in a full submission to make sure and clear that he knew, I am bowing to you. You know, not just once, I'm going to do it 7 times. Each step I take towards you, I'm going to bow. You know, Esau, not knowing whether he was going to continue bowing, just runs towards him and says, nah, I'm receiving you. You know, and it reminds me of Joseph, you know, when his brothers thought they were going to stomp him out. He was going to stomp him out. And he loved him like the prodigal son, where the father receives him. So all of those things come to mind. So that's kind of what I see with those verses. Sister Linda, go ahead, sis.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I just wanted to very quickly just say something that I see also here that pertaining to what you guys are talking about. Sometimes Sis June plays that worship song for us on Shabbat morning. Shakar, Peru, Sagar, hey God. Well, this word for bow down here, it paints a really different picture, kind of like a very interesting picture of the way Yaakov approached his brother, because Shakar, it's the Hebrew word for worship. It has a picture of humility before Yah. It means to bow down before a superior in homage, to prostrate oneself out of honor or respect to someone deemed superior to oneself. So now I see him, although he has stolen his birthright and his blessing, him coming back, respecting him in the true royalty of who he is, Esau, and the royalty of who he is. And it appears to me as if this is what pleased Esau so much, because it's a matter of recompense, part of the recompense package that Yaakov had redeemed himself of and was willing to relinquish, understanding who he is by now on his own and not needing anybody else's anything to be who the Father had ordained for him to be. And this word Shakar is only used, it paints a completely different picture of worship than how we look at worship. Worship from a Hebraic concept is to bow down yourself, to prostrate yourself, to get the utmost reverence and a respect. And I said, I'm going to start looking at that word worship in my own personal life from a different aspect also. Praise Yah.
Praise Yah. Yeah, I mean, I think even the language afterwards supports the what you're saying is as far as Jacob submitting himself to a hierarchy, because he even calls himself Esau's servant in verses to come. But I think it also brings with it that the way he bowed down brings also a sorrowful sorrowful gesture as well. You know, it's just like when you do something to someone and you say, man, you know, that's my fault, and you overdo it. You know, you make sure that person knows that you did something to harm them. You did something to wrong them, better said, and you are remorseful. And I like the word you use, recompense, because last week we talked about true repentance, true forgiveness. If I steal your bike or your car, Sister Linda, I can't bring you back a bike. That's
Right.
me showing that I'm sorrowful for what I did. I'm gonna bring you back 2 cars, and build a 2-car garage on the side to help for you to protect those. That's I'm sorry, and that's the Hebraic understanding. Yah says that. So, yeah, good point, sis. Very good point.
You're gonna do all that, you go ahead and take my car. I got a few things I'd like to add here. There's a lot of Aleph Tavs in here that are really interesting how they're placed. But before I get into those, I find the question that Mike had in Genesis 33:2, where he's putting, where he's basically dividing up the children. Basically, he's doing it unto the 3 different levels, I guess, because he's putting the handmaids and their children first in front of the ones from Leah. And then, of course, the final ones that is Rachel. I think it's in an order of somewhat of distinguishing between them, and also maybe for a level of protection, I would think, where he's got them in an order where his brother may recognize that, I guess, the order of importance, I guess, in some sense, as far as the handmaid versus Rachel, being in the back, because you can see the order of how he's divided them up, and who he put one in front of the other. Almost, I don't know if it's like a shield in a sense in my mind, like, if something was going to happen, there's an order of things where he may be able to protect his real heir, Joseph, So that's one area I see that, maybe we can get into a little more about that. But let me look at the placement of these. We see them right in first in Genesis 31 or 33:1, where he's talking, and Jacob lifted up his eyes and he looked, and behold, Esau came with the 400. So I can almost imagine his heart's like falling at that point, not knowing what's going to happen. And he divided Aleph Tav, the children of Leah and Rachel, and unto the 2 handmaids. And then he goes on in the second one where he says he put Aleph Tav, the handmaids, Aleph Tav, their children foremost, then Aleph Tav, Leah and her children after, and then Aleph Tav, Rachel, and Aleph Tav, Joseph behind. So there's a couple of covenant symbols that we see here placed on Joseph and Rachel versus we see on the handmaids and even Leah, because it doesn't show the Aleph Tav on her children or their children versus it does Rachel. And then as we go on to Genesis 33:5, it says he lifted up Aleph Tav his eyes, and he saw Aleph Tav the women and Aleph Tav the children, and he said, who are those with you? And he said, these are the children which Elohim has graciously given Aleph Tav your servant. So he's pronouncing that Yahuah has made a covenant with your servant, your brother, and he's graciously given me these covenant children as a promise, and I guess it would take him back probably in his mind, and maybe at that moment of what all happened, when all of this transferred. And I found it really interesting that he ran to him and he grabbed a hold of him, he was like glad to see him. It was like an embrace of these 2 brothers, as he embraced him and he kissed him, he fell on him and he kissed him and he wept. I think he was glad to see his brother, and that he was so Baruch, and still doing well. I don't think he really wanted harm to his brother at that point, I think he probably missed him. So I kind of see those kind of things there, but I think that it is interesting how the level of these children and I guess wives and handmaidens and stuff, and how their children in the order, where he puts the lesser, if you will, in front of his covenant child, his covenant one. So that's kind of what I've noticed there in that first 5 verses.
Yeah, we absolutely we touched on that as well, as far as putting Rachel. It says he put Rachel in the rear, and it's almost like he put a protection shield, that they would get to them last. Rachel, Joseph is back there. Obviously, he's a young kid at the time. So yeah, absolutely. I think that the placement of the olive tables are interesting, as we look at those week by week. It opens something up that we wouldn't normally see, I think, sometimes.
Mhm.
Brother JP.
Yeah.
There it is. All right. I just really found, what came to mind when we were reading, and he says he fell on his neck. It says, and Esau in verse 4, and Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Well, the first was the prodigal son. In Luke 15. Verse 20, it says, and he arose and came to his father, but when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. But that compassion, it was like, wow, like. And then the second, there's another account that something similar happens in Genesis 46. I just had it right now. Oh, okay, 46:29. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him, and he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. But it's just that love, it's just that love, like, wow, like, that's a masculine love to me. You know what I'm saying? It's a masculine love. It's like when you read that, what was it, John was laying on the bosom of Messiah. It's like a masculine love, and this love that's like, when I see my family that are men, and I hug them, and I'm like, yay, and I see, it's like I see my brother Nate and Brian, so far the two, I'm hugging you, you know what I mean? I'm not just giving you a handshake. I'm like, so, and in this case, it's the opposite. It's in a sincere, like, maybe there was some type of, like, I don't know, but it was just like, man, fell on his neck, and he like wept, and he kissed him, and like, just, so I just want to bring that up. In those other two accounts, I just always find that amazing, as a man, to have that in you, you know what I mean? And so, praise Yah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's parameters there. It's set in the perfect way. That manly love has restrictions. And it's done this way. So let's also keep that in mind, because, on the serious side, we do, Mike, we do have, we have an inner affection towards each other that is very clearly expressed properly in Scripture, and that is the proper way. And it's not to be squelched. You know what I mean? That the fact that I have love for not only my physical brother, but my spiritual brothers as well, is the same way. Like, when I see you, I'm hugging you. You know what I mean? I'm hugging you. I'm resting on your neck. I may withhold the kiss, but I'm a hug you. You know what I mean? Because there's brotherly love there. You know what I mean? That should not be ignored. And I think Scripture, like when John laid his head on Yahusha's breast, you know what I mean? That is a common understanding of how brotherly love and affection should be given. So we can't deny that, and I'm glad you pulled that out, because we have to escape what the world makes. and look at what Yah creates, right? So
You okay if I lay my head on your bosom?
absolutely. You have to bend down a little bit though, as tall as you are. But yeah, I mean, I think there's something for us to understand, you know, and there's also instruction we have to give in the realm of correction based upon what the world puts out. So praise Yah for that. What else we see there? Anything else? JP?
Yeah, just one more cross reference that I found here for verse 4, 33:4. Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and found his neck and kissed him, and they wept. The cross reference they gave, that I think is amazing. It says in Proverbs 16 verse 7, when a man's ways please Yahuah, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. That's interesting. You know, it's interesting, you know. So
yeah, I mean, because I think there's also a picture of Yahuwah's grace here too, you know, and mercy and protection, because, you know, when we go back to 21, you know, chapter 21, Esau was burning in revenge towards him. That is the only thing, you know, the mother sends him away, never to see her beloved son again because of the revenge that was coming on her son. That's all that's on his mind. And here he receives the complete opposite because of Yah's grace here. So that Proverbs verse is a great one to add to this. Thank you. Who wants to take the next 5?
I'm gonna unmute Kathy real quick. This way she can, if she wants to get involved here. I don't know. There's no way for her to raise her hand, so.
Oh, okay.
So if she wants to be involved, at least she can speak up or something. So you're unmuted, Kathy. So if you have something you want to say, then you get a chance to speak up.
I'm okay right now, Rick. I really don't have anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, just in case you do.
Okay, thank you. What do I do if I do?
Well,
Go ahead,
since you can just speak, you know, just try to, you know, do it when, you know, no one else is speaking.
Excuse me. Okay.
All right. So JP, Mecca, you had your hand raised. What's up? Because Mecca has his hand raised too. I was just trying to figure out.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it was one of the things I was thinking is, you know, when we look at the order that Yaakov put his children or the families in, also it's kind of from oldest to youngest, I think, because if you look at the order that they were born, Leah had his first children, and then the maidens had a second, and so the strongest of his kids would have actually been in the front. The strongest of his children would have actually been near the front. And so I think if anything happened, they could also fight and protect, you know, the family more so, you know, than anything, you know, that he has, you know, his, he has his eldest in the front, so they would be able to try to, you know, defend the family, you know, if anything happened. And so I thought that was something that I thought could be a possibility, you know, for why he put him in the order he put him in.
Absolutely, I agree with that completely. That definitely makes sense. You know, you want to have, you know, your best protection up front for sure. Good point, brother. Go ahead, JP.
You just want me to read the 5 verses, right?
Yep.
Starting in verse 6.
Yes.
Okay. Then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, what meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, these are to find grace in the sight of my sovereign. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of Elohim, and thou wast pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because Elohim hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. One thing I like to mention that's interesting to me is in verse 10, he asks his brother, he says, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight. You know, we usually speak of grace as only in the sight of Elohim, but here, you know, he's speaking from a man to a man. And I just found that interesting, just to take that word grace and put it in a more physical realm, you know, between two people. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at that verse 2, and I saw that, but I also saw, because of the way it's phrased, I've seen your face as I have seen, as though I have seen the face of Elohim. You know, two things come to mind. One, the fact that he's reverencing him, or you know, putting him above himself. But two, that he's recognizing that grace does come from Yah, and the very fact that he sees grace in his brother, he knows that that could have only come from Yah based upon the last encounter. You know what I mean? So if you take all those things into consideration, this would have to be a blessing from Yah, and because of that, I see Yah in your face. You know what I'm saying? So to say, right?
The actual word there used is an Elohim, though. It's actually Adon.
Mm-hmm.
So my master, or my Lord, if you will. You know, that symbol of somebody that's above you. Not that he's seeing Elohim, but he's seeing Adon.
Well, when I say seeing Elohim, I don't mean that he sees Elohim. I mean that he sees the work of Elohim and the fact that his brother is being graceful to him, gracious to him, and his brother's forgiving him, and the fact that his brother is embracing him, accepting him. You know, so not that he physically sees, like in seeing Yahusha, but seeing the work that can only come from Elohim. That's what I meant.
Oh, I think the word that Rick was speaking about is in verse 8.
Yeah.
They use the word Adon in verse 8, right? And then in verse 10, they do use the word Elohim, and when he says, I had seen the face of Elohim. So it's kind of interesting, because what Rick pointed out, I found that interesting, because he says in verse 8, these are to find grace in the sight of my sovereign, or my Adon. And then in verse 10, they use the word Elohim in when he says, I had seen the face of Elohim. So it's kind of an interesting play on words.
Also, that word that he used there as droves is actually like an encampment, or a camp. You know, I wasn't sure what that meant. And that came from the word chanan, which means to decline or to bend down. So it's interesting how that plays together in this as an encampment that's basically bound down to him, which is exactly what we see described in what's happening.
Yeah, it's like a company of troops. And then verse 11 to me, where he says, please take my blessing that is brought to you, because Elohim has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. So this continues the whole idea, is what I was saying, knowing that Elohim has caused this gracious act from his brother. You know, he knows that it doesn't come from him himself, because we can point to the heart again of man, knowing that it is desperately wicked. But Elohim provides the grace, and because he uses his brother to show him that. But the gifts, the blessings, this is where, you know, when we look back at chapter 25, chapter 27, and we see Jacob trying to usurp the blessing, you know, even though it was his anyway. Now he wants to give him a blessing. So things have come full circle and turned around.
I'm interested in verse 9 here, because it's before this, you see he's got all of his handmaids and children all bound down before him. And then in 9, well, after this, he says, what is it? What do you mean by all of this company or grove or whatever? And then he says, and Esau said, I have enough, my brother, keep that you have to yourself. So is he trying to present all of his handmaidens, his wives, his children unto Esau? Is that what he's trying to say there? Is that what Esau is understanding him to be doing? Because it seems that way in verse 9. That's what he's saying here. That Esau said, I have enough, my brother. So keep them for yourself. So is that part of that bowing down before him is like an offering to him, like giving in unto him his wife and children, or his wives and children?
I believe he done so. I mean, I think even in the mindset of Jacob, he was presenting himself a servant before his brother. Mecca, you want to add to that?
Yeah, you know, before he sent his before Esau got to the family, Jacob had sent droves of camels and asses and sheep and all that stuff to Esau. So before he even got to Jacob, he had already been met. Esau had already been met by the gifts that Jacob was offering. And so I think more so it was the gift that he was talking about. You know, what was all that stuff that you had sent prior? You know, and so yeah, I think that's what he's referring to. You know, that's what he's referring to in that situation.
Yeah, I agree. I because remember he sent them first just in case they slew them. You know what I mean? And then they would have taken another route and wouldn't have met him at all. So yeah, absolutely.
So you think it's talking about all of the animals and stuff that he sent prior, or was he also offering up his family too? And he's saying, no, you've already given me enough, you know? I don't know. That's an interesting thought, because he could be talking about what he already sent. But it's interesting. He says it after, as everybody's bowing down before him, he's telling them, no, I'm good. You know, so I guess I'm just a little unclear, I guess, if he's talking about what he already sent, like you did, Mecca, or if he's talking about the children here and the family.
Well, he says what is all that stuff which I met. So it sounded like it was already past tense that he met the drove and all that stuff. So I think it was the gifts that he had sent ahead of himself, you know, that he's speaking of, you know, and then, you know, of course, himself submitting.
Yeah, that you just answered it right there, that I met, yeah. Okay, I see what he's saying there now. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, it's good, very good. What else we see here? You ready to read on? All right. Verse 15 to, well, where did we stop? No, verse 11 to 15.
Yeah, no, I finished up on 11.
You read 11?
Yeah.
You read one verse too many, brother. So verse 12 to, let's finish out the chapter, verse 12 to the end. We'll finish that up. No, verse 12. Yeah, verse 12 to the end. Who wants to take that chunk?
Well, if nobody wants to read, you know I'm ready to read. Is
Go
Rick
ahead,
gonna
bro.
read?
You got it.
Okay, verse 12 to the end, it says, and he said, let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto him, my sovereign knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds with young are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Let my sovereign, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my sovereign, unto Seir or Seir. And Esau said, let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, what needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my sovereign. So Esau returned that day on his way unto Seir. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built him a house and made booths for his cattle. Therefore, the name of the place is called Succoth. And Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padanaram, and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a part at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar, and he called it Elohe Israel. Elohe Israel, which means the mighty El of Israel. I just added that one, sorry.
Nah, that's good. So what's going on here?
Well, you know, I zoned in on verse 15. After you see Jacob speak, it says in 15, and Esau said, let me now leave with these some of the folk that are with me. And he said, what needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my sovereign. So it felt like Esau was like humbled right there, humbling himself in a way, I guess, or kind of like, I don't know. I just felt like there was a love that Esau started to give out now in this verse, like to balance it. You know what I mean? It wasn't like all Jacob no more. It was like a balance. So I don't know. That was kind of my perception as I read it though, because he says, you know, so that's about it.
Yeah, it was funny to me how, remember, Yahuah told Jacob to go back to where his father was, but here he takes a U-turn and goes back up north. And it says he made a Succoth, he made a booth, you know, to rest. I thought that was interesting how he went the opposite way of Esau. You know, when here it was clearly the thought was that they would go together, right? So again, Jacob does opposite of what Yah was telling him to do, right? But then the last two verses, he ends up back in Canaan where he was supposed to go in the first place. You guys see that?
Well, I'll have to look at a map or something, to be honest with you.
Mecca.
One thing that just stuck out to me right now is that, you know, we see Yahusha in the New Testament telling his disciples, you know, whichever one of you that be the greatest, you know, will be a servant, you know, of the others. And so, you know, we see Yaakov here knowing that he received the blessing already from his father to rule, you know, to kind of, that all his brothers would serve him, that he would rule over his brothers. We even see him lowering himself, you know, to that of a servant. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I see something else too. Verse 18, it says, then Jacob came safely into the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. So before the city actually means outside of the city, like in the perimeter of the city, the outside parameter of the city. And it just brought to my attention how Canaan was a place where there was idol worship. We know that, right? So he's there, but he's not there, you know, in the world, but not of the world. You know what I'm saying? So that came to mind when I saw that verse, because he's in the parameter, but he's not within the city. He pitched his tent. He made his sukkah before the city, outside of the city. So
There's also a left top there before that city too.
Say again.
There's a left top there before that city. So he pitched his tent before a left top of the city. So there must be something covenant, because he also a left top. There's where he bought that a left top parcel of the field. So maybe this is part of the covenant, why he had him outside of the city for this time. This is a covenant walk that he's stepping into here.
Yeah. What else we see there? Sister Linda?
Yes. I found it interesting, a few things here. I found it interesting in 33:17 how he journeyed to Sukkot and built the booths there. That word booth is sukkah, where we get Feast of Tabernacles, the booths from. Cattle dwelt in there first, but after they came from Egypt, people were dwelling in the sukkahs. And pertaining to what you were just, Elder Rick was just speaking on, pertaining to 33:18 with the left top being before Shalom. This word Shalom is the early name of Jerusalem. And there's one more, Yaakov, he erected an altar there. El Elohe Yasharal, or Israel, the mighty El of Israel. And this is where the Father's presence would dwell. But that Shalom, it means peace, and it's the early name of Jerusalem. Praise Yah.
Praise Yah, sister. Yeah, JP actually said that at the end of his reading. He added the meaning of Elohe Israel. But yeah, great input there. What else we see before we conclude chapter 33? All right. Well, this concludes our Genesis study, chapter 33. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.